this session, this weekly webinar that we do called Stopping the Violence in America. I always like to reiterate what it means and how it got started. Actually, my name is Reverend Zachary Oliver. I'm the Vice President of UPF, Universal Peace Federation, which is the premier sponsor of this webinar. And our main concern in the beginning was gun violence. But we realized that gun violence is a problem, but one of the central problems of gun violence is who picks up the guns and why do they shoot their fellow man, their fellow brother, their fellow sister. Even though they don't know, many people don't know that we're really brothers and sisters, but they're fellow human beings. And subsequently, after several of our webinars where we have had law enforcement office chiefs of different police departments, advocates, community advocates, religious leaders, and on, and all those people who are working diligently around the country to play a central role in prevention or post-violence in their communities or at the nation on the nation as whole. So we're really grateful for those people who have come on. And this person that I have coming on today is not a stranger to us. He's been on before. But we've gone to those who are on who really made a concerted effort to point out that character education, relationships play a critical role in reducing the violence or getting to the crux of the inner workings of why people have certain angers and why people have certain feelings that are become uncontrollable that leads them to violent acts. So today we have Pastor Stevie Burke, and his topic will be the wealth of relationships, stopping the violence and stopping the violence. But let me just give you a little background of my brother. He's a good friend of mine. We like to discuss. We've done things together, and we like to, as I would say, bounce off each other some ideas. So let me give you a little bit background of Reverend Stevie Burke. He attended the American Baptist Theological Seminary in Nashville, Tennessee, and Virginia Union, majoring in philosophy and religion with a minor in English. He began working in 1981 for IBM, serving in several leadership capacities in the General Technology Division. He also worked in Dominion Semiconductor and Micron Technology before deciding to venture out on his own and start two cleaning auto detailing companies in 1998. His company provides restoration service for commercials, government, and residential vehicles, while also focused on creating employment opportunities for those who are re-entering in the workforce from incarceration and other life issues. Over the years, more than 100 men and women have been employed. This has opened the doors for many to move into their industries and even some to start their own business in other fields. He is licensed. Pastor Stevie is a licensed preacher, gospel preacher from February 26, 1978. He was ordained July 24th, 2016 by Pastor Reverend Dr. James Sutton at the Christian Life Church in Manassas, Virginia. Serves as the director of men's ministry and the leader of Man Up, which I think we will hear more of in this particular presentations, men's support and accountability group that has been meeting every Monday for the last 11 years. He also serves as youth pastor for the last 2 years. He is a certified marriage counselor with marriage dynamics, as well as a certified in executive leadership facilitation with Development Dimension International. He has recently received a certification as the peer-to-peer recovery specialist through George Mason University. But known as Stevie, well, his other name, I didn't mention it, but is Alvin, best known as Stephen. was born and bred in Virginia. He and his wife, Juan, live in Chantilly with 3 daughters, 1 son, and 3 grandchildren. Without any further ado, let us invite and welcome a very good friend of mine, Pastor Stevie Burke. Welcome.
Hey, how you doing? So thank you so much for inviting me. It's always a pleasure to come and have conversations about things that matter. I'm always excited to be with you guys because you guys are all over the place and you guys are intentional. Um, Reverend Oliver said a lot, so I don't want to talk about me. But I do want to say that I am now the senior pastor of Christian Life Church in Manassas for the last 3 years in December. So God has been very kind to me in spite of myself. So with that said, I know Reverend Oliver asked me to come on today and talk about what I love to do. And what I love to do above everything else is help males become men. I'll put it like that. To help males become men. And we know that in the culture that we live in today, men are really in the shadows for the most part. A lot of advocacy, a lot of finances, a lot of money is going to the female side of the fence, which rightfully so. They deserve opportunity just like everyone else does. But to the degree that is at the demise of men. And so I'm an advocate for men. I'm an advocate for men in every sphere of life, every sphere of influence. To our own detriment, we've done a lot of harm to ourselves as the male gender with our male chauvinism and all those other things that, for me, regretfully so, I was part of the narrative. So for the last 15 years, I've been meeting with men every Monday. And if you think about it, every Monday for 15 years is a long time. So, but it's been beneficial. During COVID, because of the restrictions of meeting in person, we had to go to a different platform and we chose the Zoom platform. Well, little did I know that it was going to go across the country and land in Canada. So every Monday at 7:30, we log on with men across the country and in Canada, and we talk about what life looks like from a male perspective, some of the struggles, some of the propensities that we have as men, and how do we recover from that with the help of the Lord. And so I'm a big advocate for male accountability, male transparency, providing a safe place for men to really be honest. Because if you want an honest man, give him a safe place. If you can provide a safe place for a man, he will be honest. I promise you. I've seen it for 15 years, and we spend a lot of time with men who are in recovery, whether it's sex recovery, alcohol, or drugs, or some sort of recovery. And it's been amazing to see these men come on for the first or second or third time and realize they have now come to a place where they can be just completely honest. And we know as humans, we always don't tell the truth. And part of the reason is because we don't feel safe with whom we're telling the truth to, or if the place that we're in is a safe place to tell the truth. And so for me as a facilitator, as a leader of this group, it has become essential for me to provide a safe place for every single man who logs in to be able to tell his story. And we all have a story, and it varies from person to person, experience to experience, ethnicity, ethnic group to ethnic group. We all have a story. And the crazy thing is there's a lot of similarities in our stories. There's a lot of similarities in our stories. And so we're going to, Oliver was asking me to talk about the wealth of relationships. And you guys can interject anytime you want to. I love talking to people. I don't like being the focal person. So if you guys want to unmute and ask me something, feel free in the dialogue. I would love that, the exchange. But, this past Monday, I was talking to the men, we were talking about the need for honesty. And I was telling the men that your honesty can provide me a level of freedom that I may not be privy to. Why? Because I'm ashamed of my story. The shame of my story can keep me incarcerated to the degree that I can't do anything other than that. And so when one person is able to share their story, it gives me the opportunity to believe that I can share my story too. And I can share my story to the degree that it doesn't bring about condemnation, but it may bring about correction. And so there's a difference between correction and condemnation. You know, our parents always corrected us and we didn't feel like as they were condemning us. And so correction is important. Anytime you see bad behavior, in order to change the behavior, you got to correct the bad behavior. One of the worst things we can do is condemn individuals who act out the bad behavior. It causes them to recoil and not want to share. So one of the things that we did this past Monday was just talked about the need for one person to be honest, so a multiplicity of people can be honest also. And so, and when we look at the relationships that we have, every relationship has a degree of honesty, whether it's a husband and wife, whether it's a parent and a child, whether it's a child and a parent, whether it's siblings, you know, we all honest as we probably should be, or we want to be, because of whatever bias or stigma that we may feel people have against us. But I have found in these last 15 years that there is so much wealth in relationships. You know, we look at wealth as something that is tangible, something that I can put my eyes on or something that I can put my hands on. But most of our wealth is found in relationships, to be honest with you. You are as honest, you are as wealthy as your relationships are. Would you agree? A lonely person is not really that wealthy. But a man with many friends is real wealthy. I believe in this adage. Sometimes access is better than ownership. I love access because that way I don't have the responsibility for paying the bills. I don't have the responsibility for paying the taxes. I just have access to it. And the owner has the responsibility of paying it. But what I have to guard and govern is the relationship. I have to be able to steward the relationship well in order to have access to what it is that I'm granted access to. So there's a level of wealth in relationships that we can't monetize, in the sense that, and there are cases too where we can monetize our relationships because one relationship can put you in a place where you can acquire more finances than another. But as poor as your relationships are, is as poor as you are. If you're poor in your relationships, you're poor, period. So any questions so far? Any comments? Anybody want to say anything? Go ahead, Wayne, Mr. Hawkins.
Friendship with my brothers and sisters is really an expression of God's love, being able to love and to be loved.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a choice. It's really a necessity.
Mm-hmm.
So 15 years meeting once a week. That's nearly 800 meetings with your close friends. So that's a consistency that I really enjoy hearing. So those are my few thoughts on hearing you. I like what I hear. Keep going.
One of the things that I've come to understand is that, you know, we sometimes have 50, 60 men on the call on a Monday, and somebody will invite another man because he gained something from the last meeting. So he'll invite another friend of his. And so he comes on. And so we have this group of men from every sphere of influence that you could think about, whether it's PhDs, whether it's homeless, whether it's wealthy, whether it's poor, whether it just got out of incarceration, whether it's somebody in rehab, literally in rehab at the moment, whether somebody's out of rehab, somebody who's 30 years clean. So we find that in these relationships is unmeasurable wisdom. And the Bible tells us wisdom is the principal thing, but in all thy getting, get understanding. So in these relationships, what we find wealthy is wisdom. And wisdom can produce wealth, but wealth can't produce wisdom. I've seen it over and over again, where people who are wise produce wealth, but people who are wealthy don't produce wisdom. And so in these relationships that we have, we see men that come out of rehab that never go back to rehab. We see men that come out of incarceration never go back to incarceration. Why? Because we invest in their lives. We choose to do life with them. Not a moment, not a Monday meeting, not a Sunday service. We choose to do life with them. And so it's a choice that we make to invest in their whole life. And in return, they invest in somebody else's life, or they invest in our lives. So we find this across the board, that the wealth in relationships is unmeasurable.
I have a question.
Sure.
And I think you answered it partially. How do you see strategic role in two aspects of reducing crime, post and prevention? And you've mentioned, of course, there's guys who came out and it really reduces significantly their recidivism.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, even stuff like that. But how do you specifically can tell us how that plays those wealth or relationship plays that critical part in reducing crime?
Look at pre, right? Let's look at the pre. When you find most of these persons who pre these incidents that they find themselves in, there hasn't been much investment in them. Whether it's young people, whether it's young males, there's not been much investment. There's been much conversation to them and about them, but not much investment in them. Meaning this is that when you grew up in a single parent household, it's hard for a single mom of several children to really invest in her children. She can provide, but it's hard for her to invest. It's easier to invest in children when they grew up in a two-parent household. And what I mean by that is that oftentimes when we are in the presence of our children, we're not present with our children. How many of us have been in a conversation, we're physically there, but mentally and emotionally we're somewhere else? So it's hard to invest in that moment when you are really somewhere else, but your presence is here. And so when I look back, I see where a lot of these individuals, a lot of these men, there was no one who invested in them. Meaning, ask them specific questions like, so what is it that you see yourself doing 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and how can I help you get there? And then literally, intentionally helping walk that person to that place. So what I've done, even with my business, is that when men have come out of prison or some place of rehab or something like that, I tell them off the break, you can't do this forever. This meaning this job, because I'm not going to do it forever. And so what is it that you want to do with your life? And so when they tell me, because of my relationships, I can partner them with somebody who's already doing what they want to do. And so I can hand them off to the next person. So what we've done now is we collectively, as a community of men, invested in this one person. And if you do that one person at a time, you can change the narrative. And so that's something that I do very intentionally, is I invest pre. Now, if you get a post situation, then you have to still do the same thing. The problem was that you got to unravel some things, because there's a reason why they got there. And those things have to be addressed so they won't go back there. So if there's some sort of trauma that they've gone through, we invest in their recovery from the trauma. If you have a angry young man who goes to jail, he comes out of jail, but you never deal with his issues. You give him a job, you still got an angry young man with a job. Something could very easily trigger him and he'll find himself in the same place. Why? Because you really didn't deal with the root cause. And the root cause is really what you should be after, what we should be after. And it's not always just throwing money at a situation. Sometimes it's throwing your life at a situation. The Bible says Jesus died for us. He threw his life into a situation so that we could recover, and not just recover, but recover well. So it's important that we are willing to really invest in people's lives. And sometimes, most of the times, it requires time, effort, you being present, your wisdom, sometimes the things that you have access to. All of those things give people a better opportunity to become who they were really supposed to be.
Thank you for that. Answered that pretty well. James Mooney, how are you? Welcome.
Well,
You have a
thank you.
question.
Pastor Burke, I really appreciate your messages that you're giving. And if there's anything that I could possibly add to what you're doing, and maybe even give more clarification in describing what you're doing, is by bringing these men together. In order for men, especially if they've been in war, etc., or in prison or incarcerated, they need what is a good word for it? They need somebody to hear their stories without any condemnation to it. When they share that story, they're able to, and then they have love afterwards. Wow. That's when you start going forward. And that's when you have an investment in another human being or human beings. And they give encouragement to go forward. And they'll gives encouragement for them to seek out almost unthinkingly, they'll seek out relationships that will match the posture that they had prior to going into this story that has done so much damage to their character. And they will gravitate to their original, and sometimes they'll look for something that they never have received. And that's quite often, especially people that have been incarcerated. And they did not have given the opportunity, or they would not accept the opportunity to share their story and then receive after it's done, knowing that I worked in the prison system for over 7 years as a counselor, and I'll never forget this one. He was a Cherokee man, about 6'5", and he was in there for murder. And he basically, we're talking about forgiveness, and he said that I can't be forgiven because I'm a murderer. And we all jumped up on him. He says, "Yeah, you've killed people, but you're not a murderer. You're a child of God." And that kind of concept makes unbelievable things in people. Anyway, I appreciate your presentation.
You know, James, that's such a true statement. I think for me, what I have allowed the guys to do, the gentlemen to do to come on, is to let them know there's value in their story. Their story has the ability to set other people free. And so when you find wealth in your story, it's easier to share that. And as the facilitator, as the leader, it's important that I share my story. As nasty, as bad as it can be, if I share my story, they feel as though, wow, if Pastor Stevie can say that, then I probably can say the same thing too. And to your earlier point, without condemnation, the worst thing we can do is not correct. The best thing we can do is not condemn.
You know, I have another thing that I'll like to put out there is that I got in the position very rapidly within the first few months of being a counselor, is that I got to the position that I believed whatever the person said. Because on some level of consciousness, whether it is on their life in this realm, somehow they touch into other elements that have in their past or in their genealogy or DNA, they're tapping into that experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so I never, whatever they say, I consider it as being truthful. And the moment they feel that I'm with them and I'm not condemning whatever they're saying,
Mm-hmm.
magic happens.
Yeah.
Magic happens. So I just trained myself that no matter what they tell me or what they say in the group, I accept it as being true.
Right.
And that is just, for me, I found incredibly magical in assisting people to be more responsible.
I'm telling you, James, that is so true, because again, we all have a story. Unfortunately, not everybody wants to hear our story, because the narrative is that your story isn't worth anything because of what the story may entail. So what we've done is we've taken all that stigma out of telling your story. And so we've embraced your story to the degree that now we are part of your story. The minute you tell me your story, I am now a part of your story. And so we find great wealth in that. And so I never make anybody or anybody's story feel less than mine. So this isn't a story about competition. This is a story about deliverance. So everybody's story is about their deliverance and the ability to deliver someone else. I'm not trying to see whose story is the most ratchet or whose story is the most sinister. I'm just saying, tell your story. And your story is just as powerful as my story is to me.
But there's something that when you first started to share your thoughts and feelings and about people are willing to listen and accept your story, that's the major part. The major challenge that our society has is that often when that person starts telling the story, people relate to that, but haven't accepted it in their own lives. And therefore they shut them down and nobody is listening because they're afraid, because it relates so much to what they've done, but it keeps it covered up. And so when you develop a system or a group like you are, that we don't care what the story is, and we're accepting because we've already accepted the fact of the horrible things that maybe we have done or whatnot, but we've accepted it and know that that was yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
Today and tomorrow is a whole new game. Anyway, I just wanted to say to you, the reason that your group is so powerful is because nobody is strung up on denying I'll just call it the evil that people can do.
Mm-hmm.
They're not stuck in it. They're willing to expose it. And transparency is perhaps one of the most powerful aspects of being cured of inappropriate behavior.
Amen.
You know, James, you know, the crazy thing is, and I see you, Mr. O'Connell. James, the crazy thing is that over the 15 years that I've done this every Monday, right? There's not a story line that I've never heard. So you tell me you murdered someone, I've already heard that. You tell me you raped someone, I already heard that. You tell me, I already heard that. So your story isn't something we haven't already heard. What we haven't heard though is your story. So we make that very distinction. You can't say anything in this meeting that we have not already heard. We just haven't heard your story.
Yes,
Nobody's
thank you.
going to be shocked. And that's
Yeah.
the issue, because a person immediately knows if someone is being shocked and, oh my gosh. And all, and so a system or a group that you have is so powerful because nobody's going to be shocked. And so people are going to feel free to go
Mhm.
ahead and express their stories.
Mhm.
I mean, that's powerful, Pastor. Those kind of groups are the solutions to the incredible challenges we have now. And if we can get people or countries to be able to share and admit the atrocities that they've been perpetrating for generations of time and be truthful with the thing instead of acting them out, then we got the answer. But what you're doing is the answer in one form to what the human condition needs to do on a widespread international way. So I keep my hand off to you.
Thank you. We have some other people real quick. We have
Go ahead.
other people that would like to come on. Thank you so much. And then you can answer that a little bit. Just wanted to say one of the critical points that he did make, a safe place. And a lot of times what happens with the safe place situation is that people can stay in denial. When you stay in denial, then you stay in your own self that still perpetuates behaviors that becoming to the fact that what you do is they become normal for you. You know what I mean? And but now there's safe, and I like what he said, a safe place where men, especially he was talking about men, who can come together and really hear their story, allow them to be liberated and tell their story without being judged for their particular story, but also find liberation. But we have Dr. Jenkins online, and we wanted him to greet, because I know he's running around. Reverend Jenkins, thank you so much for coming on. We have Pastor Burke, who is discussing about his
Thank you always, Dr. Burke. Your clarity and your practice of these principles are absolute. And I see Chief Mooney and all the Nadia and so many others. Reverend Oliver, we just want to support you. We're going to the congressional offices today. We're in the Rayburn building. We have also Yuriko-san and also Nanai-san. They're with UPF, very powerful leaders. And we have a special guest here. Oh, that's Reverend Oliver's wife. They have powerful relationships with many congressmen. And I just we're going to another meeting right now with Congressman Turner. We just met Congressman Danny Davis. So thank you all for your support for Leadership for Peace. We just couldn't let this program go by without commending you, Dr. Oliver. Thank you.
Thank you. My wife. Hello from his aunt.
Your wife is very high quality and effective. She got to meet the congressman last week as soon as we walked in the door. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You know, Reverend Oliver,
All right, thank you.
You always ask me something, and I think this is important. You always ask me, is this thing sustainable?
Right, sustainable.
Sustainability
right.
is what makes the change. And if you have a program that isn't sustainable, the probability of it being successful is unlikely. And so how this thing has become sustainable is because I do this every Monday, whether it's one guy or 100. And it's always the same thing. It never wavers, it never changes as far as the room. So the room is always safe, whether we have 100 guys or one guy. And the consistency has proven itself that this thing is sustainable. We always are consistent. We always are there. We're never not there unless it's a holiday and I want the guys to do life with their families and stuff like that. But so many of these programs are sustainable because people aren't invested in it, in the sense that they're not invested in the people. They're invested in the program. If you're invested in the program, you're not invested in the people. if you invested in the program and the people, the program will succeed. So the question is, where's your investment? And oftentimes we invest in the program or our position in the program. It's never really about the people. And that thing is never sustainable because people make the program.
Well, I think that was a rubber meets the road when you just said that. I'll have John come on in a minute. Is that if you invest in the program and not the people, there's where the rubber meets the road, and there's where the where the rift, or if you will, comes in with between the wealth of relationships, because it's the relationships that is transformative, not the program. The program is there for structure to build a system where those people can come in and find their value, find some liberation, and find some sustainable change. And you can only do that, as you have keep iterating, is through substantial and wealthy relationships. Wealthy relationships still goes back to what? Values, family values. Relationships are based on, basically the family values are based on relationships. So in that whole structure, they're finding maybe surrogate moms, surrogate fathers, surrogate brothers and sisters who see them not from, like you said, from the sin that they committed, but as Mooney said, James Mooney, as them as being children and sons and daughters of God who got caught up in the situation. Right. This allowed them to manifest the real God behavior of God nature that is down there somewhere. It's there because God created good. Everything is good. I thank you so much, but I'd like James, not James, but John, do you want to come on and say something? Yeah, welcome.
Well, brother. Yes, Pastor Burke. Yeah, it'd be wonderful to be in your program. I can envision being there. And like you say, if you have stability like that every week, week in, week out, and well, the most powerful thing in counseling is if someone can get honest with themselves, right? And counselors spend many months and seasons trying to get somebody to be honest with themselves, and it's difficult. But in your situation, it's like more natural, seem like, And actually men, really have more of a tendency to be alone, and compared to women, they're not as expressive, and relationships aren't as rich, I think, and aren't as valued. I think it's important that young people when they teach character education, of course, teach that relationships are what your world is about. You cannot just be on your own and your own thing, which I think I've had a tendency to do that a lot of times. But when James was speaking earlier, I think something came to my mind. He was talking about, I think men need to be validated. I think that's an important part of our psyche, and what we do, whatever it is. If we find something we do a little bit well, we need to be validated, and like you said, you value their story and value what they have done, and express this kind of nature that we need to be understood and accepted and validated. So I appreciate what you're doing. It's incredible. I wish I have quite a bit of envy for someone who does such a program for so long. It's just wonderful, So thank you for coming on and sharing. And we really support you.
Mr. O'Connell, you said something that bears repeating, and that is, I have most of the time men need validation, right? And I use this example a lot, is that when we look at the life of Christ, and you noticed his father Joseph, you never see any writings of his father Joseph validating him. The funny thing is that the minute that John the Baptist baptized him and Jesus was about to begin his ministry, the Bible says that a voice came from heaven and said, "This is my beloved son in whom I am well pleased." What you see in that moment is Jesus's father, God, validating him, saying, "This is my beloved son in whom I am well pleased." And so it wasn't just a private validation, it was a public validation. And oftentimes we as fathers, we may privately validate our sons, and that's fine, and our daughters, but a public validation works amazing in the life of the son that's been validated. What we find most of the time is a father or a mother ridiculing their son or daughter publicly, but never validating. It's something about a child that's validated publicly that makes them stand taller.
Right. And the opposite side, other side of that, yeah, if you're, you know, derided by your parent in public is really most destructive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It hurts so much. Just even small kind of a derisive comment, you know, yeah, it's really makes it tough for a child to bear that kind of, you know, parent.
I see that a lot in marriage counseling. You know, we're talking about relationships, right? I was just in Jamaica a couple of weeks ago, and Jamaica isn't a real rich place, right? As far as wealth in the sense of things that are tangible and things, you know, things like that. But what I found was the wealth in their relationships that was amazing. And again, we're talking about wealth in the sense of relationship. No, they don't have the options that we have here in the States, right? But what they do have the option of is choosing to love family, choosing to love in relationships. And to our own detriment, we have too many options of things to love, whether it's our dog, our cat, our goldfish, our monkey, our parakeet. You know, we love all these other things, and we really never invest in the people in our lives.
Yeah.
And when you have those kind of options, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't have a nice house or a nice car. I'm not saying we shouldn't have that.
Yeah.
But when that becomes my identity, I am poor. And I lack wealth in the sense that the Bible says this, what profit a man that gained the whole world and didn't lose his soul? What's the point?
That's true.
Solomon said this. Solomon said, you know, I have worked hard for all of these things. I worked hard and I'm a wealthy man. But what sense does it make to leave it to fools? So we accumulate all this stuff to leave an inheritance to our children, but we didn't teach them character, integrity, discipline, focus. And so when we die and leave it to them, it goes to spoil. Because we never invested in them.
Right. It becomes reckless. Thank you very much. Thank you, Brother O'Connor, for coming on. Anyone else like to have a question as it relates to these wealth of relationships and also the violence that we're experiencing? And I think Pastor Burke, you made reference to even on an international level, the violence that that is being committed in Israel and in Russia and Ukraine. You made some reference that there is a lack of a wealthy relationship between the two that causes enmity and sometimes misunderstanding and preconceived ideas of one another, and that forges a warlike behavior or you know, be aggressive because we don't understand each other. Could you give us a little bit more, embellish upon that point for us?
From an historical standpoint, you have two opposing ideologies about who has the right to, right? And so it's hard when each party feels entitled to a thing. And we know God promised Israel, right? But at the end of the day, it is hard to hear the other when your point is the most important point, when your view is the most important view, when your ideology or your philosophy is the most important philosophy. It is hard to hear the other one. Unless you make an intentional decision, let me at least listen to them so I can get a better understanding as to why. So here you have two different ethnic groups who are fighting for something that, and it's been thousands of years. So this goes back not just 20 years or 50 years or 100 years, but it always has been this way. And so it is difficult to come to an agreement when nobody wants to listen to the other. And we see this even in our own country, up on Capitol Hill, in our own Senate, our own Congress, that when my ideology becomes the most important one, I will never hear you. What you have to say really doesn't matter to me. Now, I will be courteous and listen to you. I will be courteous and hear you, but I won't listen to you. And so listening and hearing have two different results. I listen to understand. I hear just to acknowledge. So, we look at this across the globe. We look at this in every group of people, and nobody really wants to listen to anybody. They just want to be heard.
Yes.
So you see this in husbands and wives. You see this even as close as husbands and wives. When you're in a conversation with your wife and you really don't want to listen to her, you just there. And we wait for an opportunity to express our point. And then the other person says, that's not even what I said. Because all you're listening for is an entry point to make your
Right.
The Bible says this: a wise person will hear the whole matter before they utter a word. We never allow ourselves to hear the whole matter before we choose to speak.
One other point to that is that I found out in relationships, and it's not exactly the content, but it's how you said the content.
Mm-hmm.
It's 90% of the misunderstanding and ill feelings are based on how you said it.
Mm-hmm.
The attitude behind how you said it becomes a very stickler for people. People don't hear what the real content was about. They just hear how it was said.
And that speaks to motive. That speaks to motive.
Yeah.
My motive is just, I'm going to be socially polite. And I'm going to acknowledge that I'm here, but I'm really not listening. So, when you see it in this, just as small as relationships between husbands and wives and children and parents, you can only imagine when you're sitting in a seat of power and influence and affluence, it is even harder to listen in those places.
Oh my goodness, it's true.
Especially if someone's speaking to you who don't hold the same position as you do, or the influence, or the affluence.
Anybody else would like to,
Yeah.
as we're coming to a close, anyone has any other remarks as it relates to?
Ray McCready had
Yes.
a good question.
Ray, oh yeah, I see in the chat.
Whoa, I got put on the spot there, didn't I? What the heck? Oh,
Sorry.
Pastor Stevie Burke, thank you. I was so interested in your program on Mondays, even though Mondays is a bit of a busy day. I was curious because I do like to listen to men's conversations and to learn from other men, how they're dealing with things, and then can learn a lot. What time and length do you use for your?
It's 7:30 Eastern time, and we tell the guys, listen, stay on as long as you can or as short as you can, because the last person I want your child to see before they go to sleep is their father. So we cause the men to exit so they can put their children to bed. We normally stay on from 7:30 to 8:30, 9 o'clock. It depends on how much they want to say. I never cut the guys off because this may be the only opportunity they have to speak.
Right.
Somebody to listen to them. So I will stay on as long as they stay on until I feel like, okay, y'all, we've got to go to bed. It's late. So I've been on as late as 1:45 a.m.
Wow.
Because it was important to me that this person was heard, and I listened to them, because if I don't listen to them, what may happen because of that?
Right.
So, I mean, you can come on at 7:30 and Ray, get off, if you can get off at 7:45 if you need to, 7:35. We just want you to gain access so you can at least hear or say. Sometimes my deliverance is in your say.
Thank you. And how do you find the link?
I'm gonna send it to you. I got your number. I'm gonna send it to you.
Oh, okay, okay, got it. Thank you.
I took your number down. I got you.
Okay. Thank you.
I want to say this before we close. Oliver, thank you so much for doing this. For me, as my beard will give away, an older Black man, a man of color. One of the things that God has allowed me to do is find myself in rooms where I never thought I was going to be able to get into. And in these rooms, I am authentically a son of God, but I'm also a man of color. And I speak from both narratives. I don't allow anybody else to tell my narrative. I tell my own narrative. Because if I allow you to tell my narrative, you're going to tell it based on a bias, a prejudice, or a lack of understanding of knowing of who I am. So I will always show up authentically me as a son of God first and as a man of color. And so, you know, whenever you show up in a room, I pray that you show up as a child of God first and a person of ethnic background, and never deny any of those things. I never deny who I am. I never deny that I'm a son of God. I never deny I'm a man of color. I never deny that I'm a man. So those three things go into every room, every conversation I go into, because people love people who are themselves. People love people who will be honest and caring and not only talk, but listen. And so I think as Reverend Oliver is trying to find out, you know, how do we change this? We can't change it in one day because it didn't happen in one day.
Mm-hmm.
We can't change it by trying to change a whole group in one day. We can only change it by having one conversation with one person at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And if we choose to do that, because this is all done by choice, if we choose to do this, we can make a difference. I'm not trying to influence anybody. I'm trying to impact everybody. In order to impact something, you have to come in contact with it. I can influence you from across the world, but I can't impact you from around the world. I have to be up close and personal. So I'm a man of impact. Now I can influence you, but if I choose, I'm gonna choose to impact you, which means I've got to come in contact with you. So I think, Oliver, to your question, is that for me, I find my greatest wealth in relationships, because relationships give me opportunity, they give me access, they give me privilege, and they just make me feel good. You know what I mean? So there is so much wealth in relationships, and we have to invest in people, not in policies, not in practices, not in positions, not in power, but in people. Because if we invest in people, we can change the world.
That's true. That is so true. And that also contributes directly to how do we begin to stop the violence that's in the world. And I think in the beginning of this webinar, I always say that when you really do a study and a survey of a lot of these children who are at-risk children, and teens are out there that are acting ugly, no matter what nationality or racial background they are, you always find that there was the missing piece, and that was the wealth of relationship, which to me, a lack of love. Because I've dealt with those guys who come out of prisons and, you know, tough guys. And I've always said it. And I was always amazed that if you could just get them in a corner outside, you know, looking big and talking big and all like that, you know, I always remember listening to one guy, and he said, I mean, you looked at him, he was tough. He looked like he was incorrigible, you know, can't stop him from being, you know, aggressive. But he said real quietly, he said, a lot of my acting out is because I never had a father. I was missing my father. I was shocked, you know, that it came out almost exactly like that. Was the same tone. So therefore, we realize that, the violence that we see within our communities, there's a lack of love, even between Israel and the Arab brothers and sisters. Each one is saying they don't love each other, right? There's a lack of love. And then you're saying, then how do we impact each one of each other with the understanding that, yes, I love you, and we're fighting basically on some misunderstanding. You see, because I'm not really listening to you. I'm not hearing anything you say. You see. So, but anyway, I'm so glad that you did come on. You and I always have very offline. We have very innovative and fruitful conversations about these different areas of violence and areas of how we can make some correction in our society that is so needed. And so we're always grateful to you coming on. I think it's a very powerful statement to say that wealth of relationships are one of the key factors in healing the world, healing humanity. And that goes back to character education.
I'm going to say this, Alvin, I'm going to be quiet.
Sure.
We're talking about, the Bible says, for God so loved the world that he gave, right? It speaks to relationship. So when God created man in the garden, he blew into him the breath of life. So he created man the only thing God created after his own image was mankind. None of creation, all of creation has his wisdom, but only man has his image along with his wisdom. So God has always been interested in relationship. And so he made us of that same substance about relationships. And so we have to understand our God-given right is relationships. And because that's where the wealth is. He said it's not good for man to be alone. And so I will provide him a helpmeet. If God wasn't concerned about relationships, Adam would have been fine by himself. But he wasn't. So we have to understand you were never intended to be alone. God did not create you to be alone. Doesn't mean you got to be married, but he never, made you to be alone. I don't mind being alone sometimes. I just don't want to be lonesome. And so many of us are not only alone, but we're lonesome. Why? Because we haven't invested in relationships for whatever reason. And so I choose to be alone over loneliness. So I just want to encourage us, everybody, is to invest in somebody, to invest just in one person. And it's costly. Investment is always costly. It's always risky. You always look for ROI whenever you invest in something, and you can't determine what that's going to be based on the market. So you can't determine what your investment's going to be in a person. But just imagine if your return on that investment was far more than you could have ever thought or imagined, only because you invested. So I would say, man, find somebody and invest in them, because everybody is worth investment. Nobody is worthless.
Thank you very much. That's very powerful. And I think as we come to a close, I want to thank you again, Pastor Burke, for coming on. But I wanted to say that even in the wealth of relationship, I think the operative word that came out of your mouth, but it is the reality. The operative word that constitute the whole constitution of wealth of relationships and what God showed from the beginning is that he gave first. Giving is a powerful force because first the Creator gave. He set the standard and he set the prototype. And that's where it's missing right now. In order for those wealthy relationships to become embellished upon and fruitful is giving. And you said it in other words. When you sacrifice for someone, when you invest, that's giving. And we want to thank you for those great words. I know you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I was just going to say, again, I love these conversations because it's what makes me get on every Monday, because all 19 of you make my Mondays worthwhile. Believe it or not. Because of you 19, I'll get up Monday morning and log on at 7:30 on Monday evening, and I can stay on till 2 o'clock in the morning because of you. Because you think that, so what do I do? How do I help Mondays? You prove to me that Mondays are worth doing. You prove to me that people are worth investing in. So even
Amen.
though you may not be on Mondays, because you're here on Wednesday, you make Monday worthwhile. I mean, I mean that.
All right.
Right. Thank you very much. God bless you, everyone. Thank you so much, Pastor. We'll
Thanks, Pastor
talk.
Burke.
Yeah. Everyone, thank you for always coming on. And also, we have a live audience out there as well. Probably we can't see them, but they're there. And
live.
thank you so much, everyone. We'll
Thank
see
you very
next
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ray, I'll
Steve.
send you the number, Ray.
Oh, hey, Steve, do you want to put your link in there? So somebody else wanted
It's
to.
hard to put the link in. So I'll send it to you and you can send it to whomever.
Okay.
Only to men though.
Okay. All
Well,
right.
that's not true because this Monday and Tuesday, we're having the women on as well because we're having a conversation with the women and the men this Monday and Tuesday. So
All
I
right.
see.
Good to hear.
yeah.
That's good, boys
Right,
and
Nadia?
girls.
All right. So anyway, you send it to me and I'll send it out.
Okay, cool. All right.
Okay. God
God
bless you,
bless
everyone.
you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Thank you so much.
God bless you all, Pakistan.
Keep up the good
All right.
work. We are doing it. We are doing it.
See you next week.
Next week. God bless you. Thank you for coming.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much, Red. This is, you know,